Well, the week we've been waiting for is finally here. June 30th is on Thursday, and that is going to be the day that the BCDC takes a binding vote to determine whether or not to remove Port Priority Use Area designation from Howard Terminal. What does it mean? Well, it means that they would clear the port use from the Howard Terminal property, 56 acres, and that would clear the way for the A's to build a stadium, housing, commercial, public space, etc. there. That's a big deal. Now, what do I think will happen? I think the A's will get the big vote in their favor. What they need is 18 BCDC commissioners out of 27, a 2/3 majority, which is a pretty high bar, to vote in favor of removing port priority use. I think that's going to happen. I also think what will happen is opponents of the project will immediately try to say that it's not that big of a deal that they cleared this major hurdle. It's procedural, blah, 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 blah. It's a big deal. The reason it's a big deal is because if they vote no, the project is essentially dead. So why am I so confident? Let's look at the BCDC's very own report. This is their own staff's recommendation, and the staff recommends page 25. We skip right to the end because often in these documents, the end has everything you need. BCDC staff finds that the Oakland Athletics have demonstrated that removing Howard Terminal from Port Priority Use Area designation would not detract from the region's capability to meet the projected growth in cargo, and has demonstrated that the cargo forecast can be met with existing terminals. Therefore, BCDC staff recommends approval of BPA 219. So there you have it. From BCDC staff themselves, they recommend removing port priority use. So let's dive into this report a little bit more so we understand what exactly is going to be discussed in this big meeting coming up before the binding vote. Flipping all the way to the first page. Staff final recommendation: amend the San Francisco Bay Plan by removing the port priority use area designation from 56 acres of port priority use area at Howard Terminal at the Port of Oakland. Pretty simple. Says it all right there. They looked over everything. They decided that they should vote to remove port priority use. Now it's up to the commissioners to actually make that vote. Again, you need 18. So let's thumb through this report a little bit more. Information that is interesting here. Page 4. The SPAC, the Seaport Advisory Committee, met on March 16th to evaluate BPA 219 and provide a recommendation to the commission. This was interesting because it was painted as a hiccup, a speed bump, a big issue, where the SPAC decided that they weren't in favor of recommending the removal of port priority use. However, after the SPAC met on March 16, 2022, the applicant, in coordination with the Port of Oakland and the City of Oakland, provided a great deal of information in support of its application that was unavailable prior to the SPAC meeting. There was some back and forth ahead of the SPAC where they wanted more information. They weren't getting it. They eventually did get it, and that led to the staff overturning, in a sense, the SPAC recommendation and choosing to provide a recommendation to remove port priority use. Let's keep moving. In all of these scenarios, there was 3 major growth scenarios they're looking at: slow, moderate, and strong. The BCDC took the port's consideration, saying that they think slow is the proper use. They ended up going with moderate, but under moderate, here's what they have to say about each of the cargo forecasts. Container cargo. Under the moderate growth scenario, staff finds that the applicant has demonstrated that removing Howard Terminal for the purposes of container cargo would not detract from the regional capability to handle cargo within the forecasted planning horizon. However, staff note that the port would be at approximately 98 to 100% capacity for containerized cargo without Howard Terminal, with little or no room for growth beyond 2050. It's hard to project out to 2050. What they're saying is Howard Terminal, which isn't really used for shipping cargo anyways right now, if they removed it, they would still be able to meet the cargo needs, but it would get really tight by 2050. Let's see what they had to say about RoRo, roll-on, roll-off cargo. For RoRo cargo, under similar moderate growth and productivity assumptions, the forecast concluded that the Bay Area will need 160 additional acres of RoRo terminal space. However, in material submitted by the applicant on April 8, 2022, after the SPAC meeting, the applicant identified additional existing capacity at the Port of Benicia that compelled staff to perform further analysis. So that was big. They initially thought Howard Terminal could be used for roll-on, roll-off cargo, things like cars and other exports and imports. They determined that not only do they not need Howard Terminal for that, it's not currently being used for that anyways, that there's a bunch of additional acres out in Benicia and out in Antioch that further could satisfy the region's needs. Therefore, Howard Terminal, not needed. Checks that box. Let's take a look at dry bulk cargo. Under the moderate growth scenario, staff finds that removing Howard Terminal would not detract from the regional capability to meeting the projected growth in dry bulk cargo. So there you go. BCDC went with moderate growth. Under the moderate growth scenario, the three major concerns all are met, and they are not needed to be used for at Howard Terminal, which is why when the BCDC meets on Thursday, it's likely going to be a yes vote. Let's look at other BCDC considerations. That's on page 8. And this is a big note here. BCDC has not received an application for major BCDC permit for the ballpark project. That's a key point, because what we're discussing on Thursday, what everyone's going to be commenting on, weighing in on, it's not whether or not this project will work. It's not whether or not this project makes sense. It's not whether or not this project should be built at Howard Terminal. It's simply about should they remove the port priority use so that they can take a step forward. That's it. So once they remove port priority use, then it'll be up to the A's, the Port of Oakland, to get an actual permit where they can really discuss the merits of this. So this tells you we're stepping along the path, but it is nowhere near finished. This vote on Thursday could end the project, but it does not guarantee that anything will ever be built at Howard Terminal. That's a key distinction. Again, it could be the end of the project as we know it, but a yes vote doesn't guarantee it will be built. Still a long way to go. Another interesting note in here, they discuss the turning basin widening project. Now that's a big piece of this thing. The inner harbor of Oakland, to accommodate larger ships, needs a turning basin that is bigger. If the Army Corps of Engineers and the port decide they want to do that, they would take a chunk out of the 56 acres of Howard Terminal, up to 10 acres. That would make it so that the larger ships could turn around. It would take some of the public space out of the project, but it would not kill the project. There's plenty of plans for this already in the existing project. It is worth noting, however, that one of BCDC's core meeting principles is to not have bay fill. It's to protect the bay at all costs. If they do the turning basin, it will actually add 10 acres to the bay, which would be a win for the BCDC's core values. Moving along, and this could be one of the most important tables I've seen here in this entire presentation. What do you do with the ancillary uses that currently occupy Howard Terminal? Unless it's spelled out, how do the people currently working there and using that land feel about having that land taken away? That's why on page 16, this is so important. The port stated that the uses on the Howard Terminal property are not water dependent, are temporary in nature, and or could be relocated on short notice within the seaport's existing 305 acres of ancillary backlands. How? Well, they actually spell it out, which is really convenient because I haven't seen it fully fledged out yet. Here it is. Temporary uses at Howard Terminal include pandemic congestion. This is a pop-up yard that you see if you actually walk by there. It's right up front, and that's for agricultural shipping. They're doing temporary pop-up yards to relieve congestion and move things in and out quicker. It's 21 acres. The potential relocation site doesn't really exist because this is a temporary use of Howard Terminal. The bigger concern is, what do you do with the trucks? The cargo forecast determined 33 acres total required for 2050 moderate forecast. Port-operated truck parking lot at the Roundhouse, 15 acres. City-owned truck and wheeled container parking, 15 acres. There's 30 acres right there. Various leased lots to long-term logistics support tenants. So what they're saying is the forecast determined 33 acres total required for Howard Terminal under the moderate forecast. They're saying that there's already 30 set aside with more to come. Longshoreman training is another use at Howard Terminal, approximately 5 acres, planned for the backlands at berth 10 near 17th and Maritime Street. 5 acres, move it over there. Leased container staging and truck parking, single level wheeled, 3.65 acres. Again, this is located in the various leased lots to long-term logistics support tenants. Lay berthing for vessels, mooring facilities. What they're saying is they just won't temporarily park ships along Howard Terminal. Truck repair, no more needed as truck parking relocates. So Total of 46.83 acres currently in use at Howard Terminal of the 56 total acres. They have set aside plans for how they're going to replace those uses. Now there's another big note you can find on page 18. It is how the site would address sea level rise and contamination. This weighed heavily on the BCDC commissioners because if you leave Howard Terminal alone, it will eventually languish over time. It will become an issue. It will do nothing to address sea level rise. It will do nothing to address toxic mitigation or any of the other issues in that area. If the A's are to build a stadium and housing on this site, they're going to lift it up, and that's going to help fight the sea level issue. It's also going to help fight the contaminations. They're going to have to take care of all of that as part of the project. In its current state, it will do nothing to address those issues. So, big vote. If you read through the paperwork, if you read through the BCDC staff recommendation, it's pretty clear how they're recommending they vote. They're voting yes. Will the 18 commissioners actually heed the advice of the staff? I think they will. There really is no reason for them to go against their very own staff recommendation. You also have to factor in that there's political will. A lot of these commissioners are appointed. As far as we know, they want this thing to happen politically. I think that they're going to get through this hurdle. It's going to be a big step in the right direction, but again, I keep saying this over and over again, development agreement, community benefits agreement, binding votes have to happen, and then we're also going to have next week where they're going to start looking at whether or not to do an advisory vote, put it up to the public. So there's a lot of steps ahead here, but this is a big one, and I think this one is going to go in the A's favor. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, I'll respond, and that's it. Thursday, a big day. I'll be with you throughout the day as this thing unfolds.